What's up guys, and welcome to the first episode of Pokémon Origins Remastered. Yes, we're back with Pokémon Origins Remastered, new graphics and everything thanks to the great Bulbasaurus the G. He's amazing. These graphics are awesome guys, you're gonna love them, I love them, you're gonna love them. New episode of Pokémon, new start for Pokémon Origins. I am starting from the beginning again guys. We're starting off with the Bulbasaur line, gonna do the Kanto starters, but we're gonna move it slightly differently guys. Rather than me just doing, the Kanto starters, doing some Kanto Pokemon, going on to Johto and stuff like that, just going through Pokemon, I'm gonna do the Kanto starters. And then you guys are going to suggest more Pokemon for me to cover. What Pokemon do you want to see Pokemon Origins episodes on? We're going to start off with Kanto guys, so leave suggestions down below in the comments for Pokemon from the Kanto region for me to cover in future Pokemon Origins episodes. What Pokemon have you always looked at and thought, well, why is it designed like that? Where did they come from? Let me know down below what you want to see, and I might cover it in a future episode, guys. And you'll be able to find out the origins of the Pokemon, where their name came from, everything like that. And yeah, so really, I'm just looking to get you guys more involved in this series. I love making this series. I just want to, get you guys involved in it because it's a great project. I think, in my opinion, at least. I'm being modest, but drop some suggestions down below guys. I'm really excited to see what Pokemon you want to see Origins for, and we might see them in future episodes. But for now, let's get started with Pokemon Origins. We're going to kick this off by looking at the very first Pokemon in the Pokedex, excluding Victini in the Black-White Pokedex, which is Bulbasaur, the Grass-type starter Pokemon from the Kanto region. So, Bulbasaur, or in Japanese, Fushigi-Dene, which is Japanese name, it's the seed Pokemon and is a grass poison type, being the only Kanto starter to start off being a dual type, so that's pretty interesting, whereas Charmander is just pure fire, Squirtle is just pure water. Bulbasaur stands at 0.7 meters or 2 foot 4 inches tall and weighs 6.9 kilograms or 15.2 pounds. As I said, it's number 1 in the National Pokedex. If we take a quick look at Bulbasaur's, models, we have its regular model and its shiny model. You can see in its shiny form, it has its main skin is a lighter green colour, and its bulb has turned a darker green colour. Its eyes, however, remain the same colour, so there is no change there. In terms of evolution line, being a starter Pokemon, Bulbasaur evolves fairly quickly and will evolve into Ivysaur, its evolution, which we'll look at a bit later on, starting at level 16. So, Bulbasaur is a small quadruped Pokemon, as you can see. Being a starter Pokemon, it's got to be small. You wouldn't want a huge Bulbasaur falling out of Pokedex Lab, would you now? So, a small quadruped. It's got bluish green coloured skin, which, I don't know what my finger is. It's sort of like Cyan, but a lighter version of Cyan, a paler version of Cyan, I think. It has darker green patches all over its body though, on its forehead, its legs, its back, whatever, which are a much darker green. It has also a large bulb on its back, which you might have noticed guys, I don't know if you might have seen that there, which is obviously a green colour, not quite as dark as the patches, but sort of in between the skin colour and the darker patches there. It has small claws on each of its feet, being 3 clawed on each foot there, and also 2 tiny teeth that just jut out the corner of its mouth. Obviously, we can assume Bulbasaur is a herbivore. I don't think you'd assume it being a carnivore, hunting down prey like that. So obviously the teeth aren't really needed much, since it's more a chewing rather than a biting Pokemon. It has large red eyes, as you can see, which they are pretty large for its head size. They're not amazingly large, but they are pretty large, and the red iris section is pretty big compared to the actual eye. Now, if you look more at what we actually learn about Bulbasaur, particularly from the Pokedex entries, we learn that the seed, as it's sometimes referred, or the bulb on its back, I don't know why it's referred to as a seed, I'm not quite sure, possibly translation from Japanese games over translates bulb to seed, something like that, I'm not sure. So the seed or the bulb is planted on its back at birth. Now this planted, it seems like a really weird description to me. It's planted. It should be on the back, on its bulb from birth, since it hatches from an egg sort of thing. We see in the games it hatches from an egg, and it's already got the bulb right there. So this might just be a figure of speech, or it might just be it sprouts from birth. It starts off really small and gets bigger. Who knows? We're told from the Pokedex entries that this bulb or seed grows along with the Bulbasaur. So as Bulbasaur gets slightly bigger, the bulb gets bigger too. Now this is. Obviously, size change isn't really talked about much in the Pokemon universe, since when Pokemon hatch from eggs, they're actually the same size as Pokemon that have been around. However, obviously, as we know in the anime, there are some size differences and size changes. Not all Pokemon are the same size, whereas in the games they are sort of referred to as being the same size, so it's a bit of an iffy area there. But we're told the bulb grows along with the Bulbasaur, so we'll believe that. Now, energy is stored inside this bulb, and this some of the Pokedex entries say the bulb is filled with seeds. but some say the seed or the bulb is filled with nutrients. Obviously this could be the seeds are the nutrients, there's nutrients in the seeds, something like that, who knows. But it stores energy in this bulb, much like a camel stores, well, it is fat in its hump, not water like most people believe, but fat in its hump. This is obviously because a camel needs to go through a desert, and might not be able to, actually get food or nutrients or whatever, so the fat is there to sort of keep powering it along. Don't know why I'm talking about camels in a Bulbasaur video, but I guess it's sort of related, I'm not sure. So yeah, the seed or the bulb absorbs sunlight, so obviously Bulbasaur can go through the process of photosynthesis to gain energy, so maybe as well as eating, obviously it's shown in the anime eating food, so maybe obviously it absorbs sunlight too to get some more energy. This energy might just be referring to the fact that it, like how it powers up in battle, for example, talking about Solar Beam absorbing power from the sunlight to power up its moves, sort of thing. Or it might actually be referring to, keeping Bulbasaur plodding along, so it might not actually have to eat to stay alive, it might be able to just absorb sunlight if there is enough around. This absorption of sunlight actually makes Bulbasaur grow, so it absorbs the sunlight, and this gives it nutrients, it allows its body to grow over time. Obviously, this sort of relates to Bulbasaur being a plant. I mean, the trouble is, that this is Pokemon, this is getting deep into Pokemon. We have Pokemon, we have animals, we have plants. Pokemon, a lot of the time, are a mixture of animals and plants. Bulbasaur is a prime example of this. Its main body is an animal, but it has a bulb on its back, which is technically a plant, or something along the lines of a plant. So Bulbasaur is a plant animal. The plant on its back photosynthesizes, gives it energy for the actual animal to have, and this is giving the animal energy to grow. It also grows, we're told, by gaining nourishment from the seeds. This is sort of the same thing, the seed absorbs sunlight, gets nutrients and stuff from there, and then gives it to the animal, I guess, gives it to Bulbasaur, which then allows it to grow over time, much as plants do. So we have sort of a plant-animal hybrid here, where the plant absorbs sunlight, instead of growing itself, well, it sort of does grow itself, but instead of just growing itself, also lends this energy, this nutrients, this nourishment to the animal as well. So that's really what the Pokedex tells us about Bulbasaur. A couple of the things we learn from, I guess, the anime in general is that Bulbasaur is extremely loyal to its trainers, even if it's been abandoned for a long amount of time. So you could abandon Bulbasaur, not talk to it for 2 weeks, come back, and it would still be as loyal to you as the day you left it. So that's a nice little characteristic of Bulbasaur there. But it also has caring tendencies, as it's shown in the anime quite a lot, especially when looking after little children. So use its vines to sort of support children, carry them, actually cradles children to sleep sometimes using its vines, so it's a very caring Pokemon. And also, as we find out when Ash's Bulbasaur sort of gets to the point of almost evolving, when it's ready to evolve, its bulb will flash blue. And it's very hard for Bulbasaur to resist this evolution. Ash's Bulbasaur does manage to do so in the anime, but it's very hard for it to do. It's not an easy process at all, but Bulbasaur didn't want to evolve, guys. He didn't want to become an Ivysaur, he wanted to stay a Bulbasaur, because he was happy like that. But yeah, when a Bulbasaur is ready to evolve, its bulb will flash blue. So that's a very interesting sort of characteristic there. It's not much, we hear stuff about evolution sometimes, but not in particular like this. The actual, the bulb is sort of related to Bulbasaur's whole evolution line, as we're going to see later on, guys. So that sort of makes sense that its bulb is going to flash when it's ready to evolve. So now if we move on and look at the actual design basis of Bulbasaur, where it comes from, what it's based on, stuff like that, the actual origins of Bulbasaur's design. So looking at Bulbasaur to start off with, you might not be able to tell what it's based off immediately, and the truth is, that's because it's based off several different types of animal. It's not based off just one. It's not like it looks like a lizard, so it's very easy to tell. It's sort of based on several. It's sort of based on a form of reptile, as you might be able to tell from sort of the markings on it, the little teeth, this general design. Specifically, this reptile is a Dicynodont. Now, these are mammal-like reptiles that lived in the Permian and I think the Jurassic period, or maybe the Triassic period, one of those periods, guys, basically a long time ago. They were mammal-like reptiles, and they were basically, the majority of images you find are Dicynodonts, sketches, etc., show them being long creatures, but there are a few Dicynodonts that are sort of more stubby and short, much like Bulbasaur, and Bulbasaur's general sort of, I guess, body shape, very similar to Dicynodonts there. Now, Dicynodonts were herbivorous animals, so obviously that sort of relates to Bulbasaur being, as I've said, Bulbasaur's not exactly a predator, so Dicynodonts obviously relate to it there being herbivorous. They also have 2 tusks, so obviously we can see Bulbasaur doesn't have 2 tusks, but it does have those 2 little teeth there, so that's sort of related in sort of a way. The thing is, Dicynodonts, they sort of look like dogs, is the thing, sort of look like dogs, some of the body shapes. And being these two tusks, they actually have a name, sort of a little name, which is Two Tough Dog, which is what Dicynodont means. Two Dog Tough, rather, not Two Tough Dog. So basically, they're named after their two teeth, which is sort of similar to Bulbasaur having two teeth itself. Now, Dicynodonts were sort of large. They came in all different sizes. They vary from rat to ox size, so they could be very small or they could be very big. And this obviously sort of relates to how Bulbasaur grows as it evolves. You know, it can be many sizes. It can start off small as a rat. Obviously, Bulbasaur's not really as small as a rat exactly, but as it evolves, as we'll see later on, it does gain size. So this sort of works, especially with the ox size one when we get onto Venusaur. So that's pretty much Dicynodonts there. Then, you know, short bodies, strong bodies, barrel-shaped, strong limbs, which we'll see more when we get onto Ivysaur and Venusaur in terms of how they have to support their back weight. But generally, yeah, that's Dicynodonts for you. That's how, you know, I guess Bulbasaur came from. So, Bulbasaur also has more in common with mammals than amphibians. It takes, you know, it's got some stuff in common with both. For example, it undergoes metamorphosis like a frog or a toad. Now, I'm sure many of you know how frogs or toads work. You know, you get your tadpole or you get your frog spawn, that becomes a tadpole, then tadpole grows legs, and then eventually it will obviously grow hind legs, and will eventually become a frog. That's how frogs work, guys. So Bulbasaur doesn't exactly have the same sort of amazing metamorphosis like a frog or a toad itself, but Bulbasaur does keep the same sort of, I guess, body shape, body style as it evolves and as it grows, just with slight changes. So this is very similar to a frog or a toad there. As well as undergoing some form of metamorphosis, Bulbasaur also has several other features that are, you know, resembling amphibians. For example, it has a large rounded snout, which is similar to amphibians, as I've said there. A wide mouth, which frogs definitely do, toads do, etc. It's got wide set eyes, so you know they're not exactly close; they are wide set on its face. Again, very similar to frogs or toads. I'm going to use these guys as examples over and over. It has blotched patterned skin, as we can see with the darker areas. So again, very similar to frogs or toads, and also has quadruped-like movements, but vaguely similar to certain amphibians, for example, the common toad. Because we see as Bulbasaur moves around, especially in the anime, it actually, instead of just like plodding along like for example, a dog, it sort of jumps. Its two front feet jump and its back legs come across. So rather than walking, it sort of just hops around like a little frog. Not exactly like a little frog, but in a similar way, guys. In a similar way. So there are many aspects of its body that resemble amphibians, but that does have a decent amount in common with mammals as well, including, I guess, breeding. I guess you could say that for all Pokemon exactly, but it does have a lot more in common. Well, not a lot more, but it does have more in common with mammals than amphibians generally. But there are quite a lot in common in both sort of sections. So then we look at the bulb. The bulb on its back. Now, it's likely based on a lily or an onion bulb, which are very shaped like that. Obviously, when you think of a bulb, you generally think of that shape anyway, because obviously lily or onion bulbs are very common. They're the most common bulb you've probably seen around. You haven't seen bulbs of other sort of plants or flowers or, I don't know, vegetables, stuff like that, guys. But a lily or onion bulb most closely resembles to it, just because it's, you know, obviously if you're going to put a bulb on the very first Pokemon, the very first Pokemon someone's going to see when they play the game, you want to make the bulb sort of slightly resemble a bulb they might have seen, rather than some sort of weird bulb, a weird fin bulb that just sort of comes out its back. Obviously, this sort of bulb actually fits the design more as well. If you had some sort of fin and tool bulb coming out of Bulbasaur's back, that would look really weird. So they certainly went for the right design here, with a lily or an onion bulb being sort of, I guess, flat and thick and stuff like that. Now, if you look at Bulbasaur's naming, obviously first up we look at Fushigi-Dane, which is its Japanese name. This literally means, isn't it strange? That's literally what it means. Obviously this is because Bulbasaur is one of the very first Pokemon, so, and it's an animal with a plant on its back, so it is pretty strange, as we sort of talked about earlier, guys. It's not something you're used to seeing, you know. If Pokemon was sort of the first game like this, we've had loads of ports of Pokemon, you know. I wouldn't say Digimon was a port of Pokemon, I'm not even sure when Digimon came out, but that's irrelevant, guys. You get all the little iOS apps and apps on Android that are like, I don't know, Powermon, which is basically just rip-offs of Pokemon. So we see them all around, but Pokemon was sort of the first game well, not really the first game, but you guys know what I mean. First really popular games that introduced, you know, little animals, pretty much, that look like this. So it is pretty strange. So that's sort of what it means. It's also a pun on a Japanese word, which is spelt the same way, but sort of said differently, I think, which is mysterious bulb. So that's pretty much what it is. It is a mysterious bulb. It's a mysterious bulb on Bulbasaur's back. That's pretty much what it is. The English name, Bulbasaur, is a portmanteau. Now, what is a portmanteau, before you guys ask? It's basically where you get two words and you combine them, but not just combine the words, you combine the sounds of the words as well. Obviously, Bulbasaur is a portmanteau of bulb and saur, but it's not just Bulbasaur, it's Bulbasaur. So it's sort of, combine the two words in terms of actually saying it. You don't just get bulb and saur and put them together, you get Bulbasaur. You sort of link them in a way. It's not just combining the words straight up there. Now, as well as looking at the Japanese and English names, I'm also going to pick up on the German name for Bulbasaur, which is Bisasam. Sorry if I mess up the pronunciation, I don't do German at all. I just picked out this German name because of sort of the inspiration for it. It's actually a combination of Bisamrat and salmon, okay? Bisamrat is the German word for muskrat, and salmon is the German word for seed. So seed, bulb, same thing there, but what I'm really looking at here is the muskrat. Now, the muskrat is obviously an animal, guys. It's an animal. It's a rat-like creature, the muskrat, very similar to rats in some sort of senses, not all the senses, but it's a sort of a medium-sized rodent. It's native to North America, but also introduced in Europe, Asia, South America, etc. And it's found in wetlands. And basically, if I show you guys a picture here, it's basically I don't have to explain it. It sort of looks like. It doesn't exactly look like a Bulbasaur, really, like particularly look like a Bulbasaur, but it does have some similar characteristics, I guess. I don't know why they sort of put this in here. Maybe they didn't have a German word for lizard or something. I don't quite know. But that's what it is. This trend actually carries through Ivysaur and through Venusaur as well. So Bisasam is using all three of these names, which is a bit weird in my opinion. It's sort of like the saw from Bulbasaur, but it's in German. So I don't really know why it's there particularly, but I thought I'd pick up on it because it's one of the more interesting ones we don't really see too much. I didn't talk much about it when I went for Bulbasaur, but if you guys weren't sure, saur is the Greek word for lizard. Hence, that's sort of where it comes from. We haven't really talked about it too much. Whether, we said it was based on a reptile, lizard, reptile, sort of same thing there. As I said at the start, guys, it's sort of a lizard, a reptile, an amphibian, and a mammal. It's a mix of all three, guys, and a plant, I guess. So it's very interesting, but saur certainly works, and obviously, as we know, guys, it carries through to Ivysaur and Venusaur as well, as we look at a bit more into the episode. So before we actually finish up this section looking at Bulbasaur, if we take a quick look at looking at size and how big Bulbasaur is, if you're new to the series, guys, if you haven't seen an episode before, you guys might know, you guys won't know, but the way I do size comparisons is I start off with Ash. This Ash model is from the latest X and Y anime, and the X and Y anime had a new height. His height changed after Best Wishes, I believe, and he's about 1.6 meters or 5 foot 3 inches. So he's still pretty small, but he's actually gotten a bit taller there. So that's the size from Ash there. I compare him to myself. I'm about 6 foot, so 1.8 meters, 6 foot there, and I use, I've got red here. If we were looking at Pokemon from home, I would have Brandon there, just to spice it up a bit, I guess. So we got those two models, and then I obviously compare the Pokemon to us. I got Ash there to compare it to sort of, Ash in general, because if we see him in the anime, Ash is the most common person in the anime, so we're most likely to see the Pokemon alongside them. And obviously got myself as well, just to sort of compare how. Obviously, not everyone watching is a 6 foot, I know. Some of you might be close to 5 foot 3, in which case you can look at Ash there, but some people might be close to 6 foot, so you can sort of see how Bulbasaur is compared to sort of taller people, I guess. But Bulbasaur, being 0.7 meters or 2 foot 4 inches, comes up to just below Ash's waist and just over my knee. It's actually bigger than you might expect. It was bigger than I expected, to be honest. I'm counting this height from the top of the bulb. For some Pokemon I do count from the top of the head, but Bulbasaur, if I counted its height from the top of the head, this thing would be gigantic and it would be totally oversized, and I know it's not that size, so that's certainly not how big Bulbasaur is, but it does look pretty big. I imagine Bulbasaur to be smaller myself, sort of small enough to sort of fit in your arms, sort of thing. Not like your arms outstretched, just sort of in your arms, sort of cradling it in the arms. But apparently it's pretty damn big, so I think I'd have a bit of trouble holding those at my arms. But we'll have to see. Well, we will have to see. It's not like I got a Bulbasaur here I'm going to try out, guys. But you get what I mean. You get what I mean there. That's Bulbasaur's size compared to us, and that's pretty much Bulbasaur covered, guys. So if you move on to the second Pokemon for today, Bulbasaur's evolution, which is Ivysaur. So, Ivysaur. Its Japanese name is Fushigi-su, so obviously very similar to Fushigi-gane, but obviously slightly different, I guess. It's a seed Pokemon still, so there's no change there, and is a grass poison type, again, same as Bulbasaur. It stands at 1 meter or 3 foot 3 inches and weighs 13 kilograms or 28.7 pounds. It's number 2 in the National Pokedex, coming right after Bulbasaur, as you might expect. Looking at Ivysaur's regular and shiny models, you can see the shiny version is very similar to how the shiny version of Bulbasaur was, except we now have Ivysaur's new bud on its back, and you can see that bud is now golden colour, which looks really cool to be honest, in my opinion. The golden bud, its eyes also changed now, as opposed to Bulbasaur's eyes, which didn't change in its shiny form, and it now has orange coloured eyes, orange gold coloured eyes, as opposed to the basic red. So Ivysaur, once you get Ivysaur obviously from level 16, you can then evolve it into Venusaur, coming at a further level, which is level 32, as with the majority of starter Pokemon, it's level 32, level 36 sort of area. So you have to train it immensely. It's not like a level 50 evolution, but it is a fairly high evolution to get to a Venusaur. So, if we start off by looking at how Ivysaur has changed after its evolution, it's now a medium-sized quadruped, as compared to Bulbasaur's sort of smaller quadruped size. Its skin change has actually changed to a darker bluish coloured skin now. Now, Ivysaur's skin, I think, is prone to change through different games, through different media, because they can't seem to decide on the colour. Looking at the art in the Sugimori and the X and Y models, they seem to be very similar. It's now a darker bluish coloured skin, so it's more blue than green, to be honest. There are some aspects of green to it, but it's more of an aqua blue colour. Not quite aqua blue, but sort of a pale aqua blue sort of thing, as opposed to a green one like Bulbasaur had. The patches are now a sort of a dark blue-green colour, as opposed to there being dark green on Bulbasaur. They're now a dark bluey green, which looks more blue again, more blue than green. So Ivysaur has gotten bluer. He's gotten sadder, guys. He's gotten bluer. The bulb on its back has obviously now opened up from being a bulb, and it's now 4 palm-like leaves sort of spreading out across Ivysaur's back in almost perfect synchronization, one each way, just sort of points of a compass almost. And now it has a pink-coloured bud on its back. As I said just now, it's gold if it's a shiny Pokemon. Pink coloured bud sort of up there, and the claws and its teeth have also grown slightly, not a huge amount, just slightly. They've sort of just gotten bigger to deal with Ivysaur's growth as well. You can see that the 2 teeth are very clear now, as opposed to Bulbasaur's teeth, which were just sort of like, they were tiny and they were just slotted in the corners of the mouth. Ivysaur's teeth now come out across the edges, and you can see them even with its mouth closed. It has the same red coloured eyes as Bulbasaur did, maybe a slightly darker red than Bulbasaur, sort of similar to the bulb colour, and as I said earlier, if it's a shiny form, it'll become like a goldy orange colour. So, much as we have for Bulbasaur, we're going to look at the Pokedex entries for Ivysaur and see what we can learn from them. So, some of the Pokedex entries tell us that the bud grows larger from sunlight, much like the bulb grew larger from sunlight as well, so does the bud, so that's pretty good there. The bud also apparently draws energy from the body, which it's a conflicting entry, to be honest, because we're told the bud grows larger or takes energy from the sunlight, but then it also takes energy from the body. So if we're to believe the body one, that means Ivysaur must have to be eating food and consuming nutrients to fuel the bud on its back, but then also gets it from sunlight. It doesn't make any sense. Is the bud actually, or are the bud and the leaves giving it any energy to Ivysaur now? Are they, is it not giving it any energy anymore? Is Ivysaur left to its own devices as the bud just sort of like, yeah, screw you, I'm just going to grow myself? Or is it, it doesn't really explain that too well, to be honest. We're also told the hind legs on its back also grow large and sort of bulky to support the weight of the bud as it grows larger, because obviously the bulb can't have been very nice and light for Bulbasaur, so as Ivysaur grows, and as the bulb grows even bigger, the hind legs have to grow more bulky to actually support it, otherwise Ivysaur is just going to end up dragging itself around on its two front legs with the bulb sort of hanging off its back, which isn't going to be very nice for it, really. We're also told via the Pokedex entries that a sweet aroma indicates that the bud is soon to bloom into a flower. So that's obviously, I guess, another indication of evolution there. As it approaches evolution, there's a sweet aroma coming from the bud. Obviously, we can't actually get this in game, or in any media for that matter, apart from maybe the anime. If the characters are like, "I smell a sweet aroma around Ivysaur," maybe something like that, but who knows? Obviously, that's another fact there. We will never find out if it's true or not, but the Pokedex sometimes conflicts, as we saw with the first 2 entries there. So then, as we do with Bulbasaur, let's move on to the design basis for Ivysaur's design. There's not a huge amount to say here because a lot of it is similar to Bulbasaur. You know, it's based on Dicynodonts again. It has features like mammals and amphibians. Really, that's it. You know, it's basically just a bigger Bulbasaur with obviously the bulb being now a bud and leaves on its back. Not much has changed. It's a very similar shape. This sort of looks slightly more like a Dicynodont now, since its body is slightly longer, whereas Bulbasaur's was more stubby. Ivysaur's body has gotten longer. Its head is sort of a bit smaller in comparison to its body, whereas Bulbasaur's is sort of like half its body size, which really was, you know, didn't fit the Dicynodonts, but Ivysaur resembles them a lot better now. The bud on its back resembles the bud of the Rafflesia genus, which is obviously a genus of parasitic flowering plants. A very nice term there. Obviously, we'll hear more about the Rafflesia flower when we look at Venusaur, as you guys might know. But for now, obviously, it resembles it pretty closely too. It's not too different, you know. It's very similar indeed. So then let's move on again to the name of Ivysaur and where it comes from. So its Japanese name is Fushigisu, which can mean it seems strange. So again, building off one of the meanings of Bulbasaur's Japanese name, Fushigidene, which was, isn't it strange? You know, it seems strange. Again, very similar there. Or it could come from another Japanese word, or a Japanese phrase, Fushigisu, which is 2 words, which is strange grass. So it's basically just those 2 words put together, and you've got Ivysaur's Japanese name. So strange grass, it seems strange. Again, just building on the strange aspect, since it's very strange. It would have been very strange at the start. Obviously, we have more Pokemon that are even more strange than Ivysaur and Bulbasaur now, but at the start these guys would have seemed pretty strange, especially if they were one of the first few Pokemon they saw, as opposed to something like Pidgey, Pidgey's pretty common. It just looks like a bird. Same with Rattata, looks like a rat, whereas you have an animal with a bulb on its back. It's completely different. It's a bit strange, just a bit strange. So, obviously in the Ivysaur we have a combination of Ivy and Saur, much similar to Bulbasaur's portmanteau. This is not a portmanteau though, since it's basically Ivy, Saur. Put them together, Ivysaur, whereas Bulbasaur had the A in the middle. Obviously, hopefully you guys know what Ivy is. It's a creeping plant, so again, sort of just bringing plants into the name here. Ivysaur doesn't really have any basis of ivy, but it's just a plant, so that sort of qualifies it to be making sense there. Not looking at the German name this time particularly, because it's basically the same as Bulbasaur's one, except instead of having the seed, I think it's like a bulb or a bud instead. So very similar name basis there. You know, I sort of just picked up on the what was it called? Whatever it was called to begin with. The Muskrat's the one. Couldn't remember the name. I was thinking Muckrat. I was like, no, that's not right. It's Muskrat. But yeah, very similar there. The German name just sort of surprised me. I was like, where does Muskrat come from? It didn't make any sense to me. But that's Ivysaur's naming there. So before we move on to Venusaur, let's take a quick look at Ivysaur's size here. As we can see, it's now gained slightly more height over Bulbasaur, going up to 1 meter or 3 foot 3 inches, and is weighing a bit more, not a huge amount more, only 13 kilograms or 28.7 pounds, but you can see the top of its bud now comes up to sort of, I guess, Ash's chest height and just over my waist. So it's gotten a bit larger still, not a huge amount larger than Bulbasaur, but as you guys will see in a minute, it's a very big height jump or size jump from Ivysaur to Venusaur, which is it's surprising, to be honest. It's pretty damn surprising. But, you know, obviously, I guess Ivysaur is now the general, or at least the height of a large dog now. So it's not amazingly huge, but I guess it is pretty big for what it was. This is about the same size. This is the size I would expect Ivysaur to be, whereas Bulbasaur was larger than I expected it to be. But I guess this fits for Ivysaur there. So let's move on to the next Pokemon for today, which will be the evolution of Ivysaur, Venusaur. So, Venusaur, its Japanese name is Fushigibana, again in the same sort of form as the previous ones. Again, it is a seed Pokemon, so no change in the species name at all. And again, it's a grass poison type. It's not going to lose the poison type at all, is it? It's a grass poison type. So where it's going to stay. It stands at 2 meters or 6 foot 7 inches, so it doubles in size after evolution from Ivysaur to Venusaur. And its weight almost I think increases by 10 times, going to 100 kilograms or 220.5 pounds, which is pretty darn heavy. It's number 3 in the National Pokedex, coming right after Ivysaur, as you might expect. And taking a quick look at its models in X and Y, we can see there, at least in its shiny form, its skin becomes a green colour rather than the bluey green. Its leaves actually stay pretty much the same colour, maybe get slightly darker but don't change too much, and its flower becomes a nice golden colour. So, if we look at how it's changed after it's evolved, it's now a large quadruped Pokemon as opposed to Bulbasaur's small, Ivysaur's medium. It's now, as I said, it's doubled in size from Ivysaur, so it's gotten pretty darn big. It has similarly coloured skin to Ivysaur, pretty much the same, whereas Bulbasaur to Ivysaur is a big change. Ivysaur and Venusaur have pretty much the same coloured skin. Again, there are a few variations in the actual colour. You can see in the Sugimori art here, compared to the X and Y model, it has slightly darker there and it's got slightly lighter on X and Y. There are no longer any dark patches over its skin though. As you saw, obviously both Bulbasaur and Ivysaur had dark patches, but Venusaur doesn't have any dark patches, they've gone. So, that's something to think about there. The bud on its back is now bloomed into a flower, a large pink flower, with light pink patches on it, actually, you can see. So I guess that's where the patches have transferred onto the flower, who knows. It has a thick brown trunk supporting the centre of this flower, and obviously the leaves around it have now sort of, I guess, gotten slightly larger as well, a bit more splayed out there again, just 4 leaves there. One thing to point out about the flower, however, is in the Sugimori art here you can see it has 6 petals. In the X and Y art it has 6 petals. But throughout the games, guys, there was actually some games in which it only had 5 petals. Let me see, in Gold it only had 5, in Silver it only had 5, I think. No, just Gold. Silver has 6 for some reason, but Crystal and Gold have 5, Ruby and Sapphire 5, Emerald 5, and same with Fire Red Leaf Green. It gains the 6 back in Generation 4 though and carries it through. So there's no explanation why it loses its petal. Maybe they were trying to change the design but then thought, nah, it's better just going 3 on each side, it looks much better. There are also some smaller brown trunks that actually support the leaves, but generally you can't see them generally because obviously they're hidden by the leaves, but there are some small brown sort of, I guess not trunks, but branches just supporting the leaves around its body. So it actually has pretty much a fully fledged flower / tree on its back, so similar to Torterra, I guess. Now if you have a female Venusaur, it's going to have a yellow seed at the centre of the top of its trunk, and this it's sort of, I don't know what you call it, at the top of the trunk there's a sort of a yellow capsule, I guess, and obviously if it's a female, it has a seed right in the centre, sort of just sticking up right there. Only females though, so I guess it's just sort of introducing gender differences in some of the older Pokemon there. So, then if we look at the Pokedex entries again, as we have been, to learn some more about Venusaur, we are told very similarly to the bulb and the bud, the flower absorbs sunlight to get energy, and we can assume the leaves absorb sunlight too, because they are leaves, and leaves are what photosynthesize, rather than the flower. And we're also told the flower will take on vivid colours if enough sunlight is absorbed, so that's very interesting. Obviously never observed in the game, and I don't think observed in the anime at all, but just put in the Pokedexes. So what colour would it be if it got enough sunlight? Blue? Maybe yellow? I don't know. I don't know what colour it would be. Obviously when it's shiny it has a yellow flower anyway, but that's not related to sunlight at all. But that's interesting to think about. There are many different Pokedex entries surrounding the smell or the aroma coming from the flower. We're told in some entries that the aroma from the flower soothes emotions, and told in other entries that it has or is described as a bewitching aroma that calms Pokemon in battle. So it almost sounds as if you throw your Venusaur into battle and everyone's going to calm down, the battle's over. Venusaur stops battles, everyone. Some other entries actually say that the flower smells stronger after a rainy day, for no particular reason. It doesn't say why, it just says it smells stronger after a rainy day, and that the scent attracts other Pokemon. So very interesting there. You have very different, I guess, some sunlight. It's very different, guys. They're very, I guess, I wouldn't say conflicting here, but they're very different descriptions of the aroma and how it affects Pokemon and people and everything like that. No mention of people, but we can say it soothes emotions, so we can assume that sort of applies to people too. Then looking at the design basis, much like we did for Bulbasaur and Ivysaur, again a similar basis based on Dicynodonts and also has features like mammals and amphibians. Maybe not based as much, Ivysaur is the one that fits the Dicynodonts best. Venusaur is very similar to the ox-sized Dicynodonts. Obviously Venusaur has a much bulkier build than Ivysaur. It's not as long, but it is more bulky sideways, I guess, so it's sort of bulked up and beefed up like that. However, we have some more stuff to talk about for Venusaur at least. Now you can see at the bottom of its legs at least, it has sort of, I guess, little boils or bulges in its skin, as you can see, and this is similar to the Tuatara. As you can see on this picture here, it has sort of similar skin. It has, the little, I guess, bulges of skin. I can't explain it very well. You can see it sort of resembles it in some way, and it also just looks at it. It looks a bit like it as well. Not amazingly like it because it's not as bulky, but similar in some respect, mainly the skin. The flower on its back, as Ivysaur was related to the Ivysaur was bulb resembled the Rafflesia bulb. The flower on Venusaur's back resembles the Rafflesia arnoldi, which is I think the largest flower in the world, if I'm correct in thinking that. Rafflesia arnoldi being the largest flower in the world of the genus Rafflesia. Yeah, the largest individual flower in the world. It has a very strong and horrible odour of, wait for it, decaying flesh, which is lovely, and has the nickname the corpse flower. So, only found in the rainforest of Borneo and Sumatra, so it's not you're going to find one in your back garden at all anytime soon, guys, so don't worry too much about that. But, certainly don't want to find it in your back garden anyway. So, very conflicting to the Pokedex entries we just looked at, saying it has a soothing aroma, a calming aroma, a corpse flower. So maybe it's not got the same sort of stench as the Rafflesia arnoldi, but it has a similar design in terms of the actual flower. Now the thing about the Rafflesia arnoldi is it has 5, I guess, petals on the flower, whereas as we just talked about just now, Venusaur has 6, apart from in the games where it had 5. So maybe in the games that had 5 they thought, okay, we need to make it look a bit more like this flower sort of thing. Maybe they were trying to encourage that reference there, I'm not quite sure. But I guess they changed their mind, I guess, or something like that. But that's pretty much all the basis-wise for Venusaur, very similar to Bulbasaur and Ivysaur, with the extra flower information. So let's look at the naming-wise for Venusaur, starting off with Fushigi-bana. Very similar to the previous 2 Japanese names. It's not exactly like a translation. It's a pun on Fushigi-na-hana, which means strange flower. So again, building on the strange, we had a strange bulb, we had strange grass, and we have a strange flower this time, guys. So again, building on the strange, because Venusaur is pretty strange, you know. You had a Pokemon, or you had an animal with a bulb on its back, then you had an animal with a bud on its back, and now you have an animal with a flower on its back, because that makes sense, guys. The English name Venusaur is a combination of Venus and Saur, Venus coming from the Venus flytrap, which is a carnivorous plant. I don't really think that relates to maybe Venusaur being a carnivorous Pokemon, but the Venusaur, it's sort of just another plant to throw in there. We had Ivy for Ivysaur, and now we have Venus for the Venus flytrap for Venusaur. It also, rather than Venus, it could be Venom, because obviously Venusaur is a poison type, but I don't see that quite as much, but it's certainly a possibility, guys. Venus actually fits, completely, whereas Venom sort of has to be changed slightly to fit there. But Venom's certainly another possibility since it is a poison type. Who knows though? Who knows though, guys? So, let's look at the size for Venusaur before we finish up. Which, as I said, it did double in size, it has doubled in size since it was an Ivysaur, and this size it's shocking almost. Venusaur is now taller than me, much taller than Ash. The flower comes up to Ash's head, and I'm just slightly short on it, not too much. But Venusaur is pretty darn big. If we compared Ivysaur to it, it would be twice the size almost, which is it's pretty shocking, to be honest, in my opinion at least. It's doubled in size, pretty much doubled in height at least. It's almost tripled, I think, in width. So it's certainly a very large Pokemon. It would be about the size I would imagine Venusaur to be honest, guys. It's not like it's going to be any smaller than that, because that'd be a bit weird if you'd be able to ride on the Venusaur. It is a pretty big Pokemon, so it's certainly the size I'd imagine it to be. Now, I'm sure most of you guys know, but Venusaur has a Mega Evolution. So we're going to take a quick look at Mega Venusaur and the stuff that's changed after it Mega Evolves. So, Mega Venusaur. Obviously, majority of the stats are the same. It stays the grass poison type. Its size gets even bigger and gets 2.4 meters or 7 foot 10 inches tall, and weighs 155.5 kilograms or 342.8 pounds. So it gains just a bit more height, but its weight rather increases by 50%, which is staggering. It's a huge increase in weight there. If we look at its design and its models from X and Y, we can see. I do very much like the design of Mega Venusaur. There are quite a few things that change after it Mega Evolves. Obviously, Venusaur evolves or Mega Evolves into Mega Venusaur through the use of the Venusaurite. So that's a thing there. Once you've obviously a Venusaur, you can then Mega Evolve it. So, if we take a quick look at sort of how it's changed since it Mega Evolved, it's now grown larger again, as I mentioned with the height change. It now has a pink flower-like object on its forehead. I don't want to call it a flower exactly because it has no centre. It just sort of looks like a blob of pink at times, but I guess it is a flower. It also has dark green markings on its forehead, 1 in the centre and 2 either side. Don't quite know why they're there. I guess it's just building on the fact we had markings on Bulbasaur and Ivysaur, but none on Venusaur. It's also worth mentioning there's another pink flower on its rear end. We hardly ever see that apart from when you're using it in battle sometimes, but it is there for some reason. I don't know why. I get that it's on the forehead, but I don't get why there's one on its back end as well. maybe it's just trying to make itself pretty, I don't know. The flower on its back has also grown in size too, and the branches and vines supporting the leaves have also grown larger. The main trunk holding the flower has thickened up. It's also gotten a bit taller, thickened up too, and you can now actually see the branches supporting the leaves because it's gained another layer of leaves, as well as the leaves that were on it originally, which have risen up. It now has another layer of leaves just on its back and on its sort of shoulder pads, I guess. But it's now got some vines and branches supporting the leaves that were originally just there and have risen up. Now the thing is, if you got a female Mega Venusaur, there's actually no seed in the top. I don't know whether it's just them being lazy and not bothering to make a female version of the Mega Venusaur model, which is most likely is, to be honest. But obviously that's sort of I wouldn't call it a mistake or a confliction. I just maybe it just when it Mega Evolves it shoots out the seed and that's that. I don't know, but it's not there anyway. It's not there. If we take a quick look at the size of Mega Venusaur, obviously it's gotten even bigger from being a Venusaur, now even larger, an extra 0.4 meters taller. So you can see here, my head comes up to just the bottom of the flower now, Ash is even further down, and this Mega Venusaur is huge. If you look at its face, it looks huge. It's staggering the size of Mega Venusaur, to be honest. I would not imagine it to be this big. If I'm honest, I would imagine it to be sort of the same size as Venusaur, maybe a bit larger, but not this much larger. I guess the main increase is the increase in the height of the flower is what's really making it that big. But that's pretty much it for Mega Venusaur, guys. And that is it for this episode of Pokemon Origins, guys. A nice long episode. I was not expecting to be this long, guys, but I've just talked and talked and talked. Hopefully you're enjoying this revamp of Pokemon Origins. Be sure to tune in next time where I'll be covering the Charmander line. And also, as I said at the start, please suggest down below any Kanto Pokemon you want me to cover in future episodes of Pokemon Origins, and I'll be sure to check them out, see what you guys want to see, and maybe you'll get your idea in a video in the future. But for now, guys, I thank you for watching the first episode of Pokemon Origins Revamped. I'll be seeing you next time. Leave some feedback down below if you would so wish. I'll be seeing you then. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.